On August 15, 1944, as the first lights of dawn pierced the horizon, the tranquil waters off the coast of southern France stirred with the approach of one of the largest invasion fleets of World War II. Over 880 ships, gathered from across the Allied navies, appeared in formation against the beautiful backdrop of the French Riviera, proof that an operation of enormous scale and ambition was underway. On their decks, 94,000 American and French troops braced themselves for landfall. Their mission: to drive a wedge into German-occupied France from an unexpected direction. This was the start of Operation Dragoon, a bold and meticulously planned campaign whose speed, effectiveness, and impact would reverberate throughout Europe, yet whose name would quickly fade from the headlines and, for many, from memory itself. For most people, the Allied invasion of Normandy, D-Day, looms as the singular moment when the tide turned in Western Europe. Images of soldiers struggling ashore under fire, the storming of the beaches, and the hard-fought liberation of France are inseparable from our collective memory of World War II. Yet just over 2 months later, a second armada struck the opposite end of France. This second D-Day would play a vital and sometimes underappreciated role in the ultimate defeat of Nazi Germany. To understand what led to Operation Dragoon, we must go back to the closing months of 1943. The Allies faced momentous strategic decisions. In Italy, Allied armies pressed northward, wary of the tough battles yet to come. In England and the United States, planners debated the next decisive moves. The Germans still held most of Western Europe in a relentless grip. The core question confronting Allied commanders was, how should they strike, and where, to bring about Germany's defeat at the minimum cost in lives and time? The spark for a dual-pronged invasion had been struck as early as 1942. U.S. Army Chief of Staff General George Marshall advocated for a strategy that would maximize pressure on Germany by opening up as many fronts as possible. The Americans envisioned simultaneous invasions, one in the north, targeting the coast of Normandy, and another in the south, aimed at the Mediterranean coast. But as plans evolved, this second landing triggered deep and passionate disagreement among Allied leaders. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill wielded considerable influence in wartime strategy, and he disagreed sharply with the American proposal. Churchill saw greater promise in striking through Italy and potentially the Balkans, moves he believed would draw German forces away from the Eastern Front, while blocking Soviet influence in southeastern Europe. Presidents Roosevelt and Truman, however, along with their military chiefs, saw the capture of major French ports as essential. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower became the staunchest advocate for targeting southern France, arguing that only there could Allied armies secure the logistical lifelines necessary to sustain an advance deep into occupied Europe. Across the table at the Tehran conference, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin listened closely. He too pressed for a maximum Allied commitment in the West. The Red Army was locked in titanic battles against the Wehrmacht. Every additional front forced Hitler to thin his lines, and every new attack in France relieved some of the pressure on Soviet soldiers. Under these mounting arguments, Churchill at last acquiesced, adding wryly that he had been dragooned, compelled by his allies into accepting the plan. Thus, Operation Dragoon earned its code name. Although the operation was originally scheduled to coincide with the Normandy invasion, the shortage of amphibious landing craft, vital for all such assaults, and setbacks in the Italian campaign forced a delay. Only as the Allies secured their hold in Normandy did preparations in the Mediterranean gather pace. Soldiers of the U.S. 7th Army, commanded by Major General Alexander Patch, trained extensively at bases in Naples, Corsica, and North Africa. French units under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny readied themselves for the chance to liberate their homeland. While the Allies massed their forces, the Germans faced a dilemma. Southern France had once been bristling with fortifications, forming part of Hitler's vaunted Atlantic Wall. However, the ferocity of the fighting in Normandy drew many German units northward. By the summer of 1944, the defenses of the Mediterranean coast were thinly manned and dangerously overstretched. German Army Group G, under General Johannes Blaskowitz, held responsibility for the region, but the resources at his disposal were woefully insufficient for the scale of the threat that was about to materialize. The chosen invasion area stretched between Toulon and Caen, sweeping across nearly 45 miles of French coastline. The Allied plan called for 3 main landing zones, codenamed Alpha, Delta, and Camel. Paratroopers would drop behind enemy lines to sabotage communications, cut off reinforcements, and seize key objectives, while powerful Navy guns and commando assaults would clear the way for the main landings. In the hours before dawn on August 15th, over 5,000 airborne troops, American, British, and Free French, climbed aboard their aircraft in Italy. Their destination, the Argens Valley, just inland from the beaches. Their mission was daunting: block German reserves and sow chaos behind the main lines. As they dropped from the sky, other Allied commandos were already launching daring nighttime attacks on coastal gun emplacements and observation posts. Among these, French naval commandos, led by Commander Serge Manaranche, scaled sheer cliffs under the cover of darkness to neutralize enemy artillery, a feat of courage that would ease the agony of the impending amphibious assault. Just as the first rays of sunlight crested the hills, the might of the Allied navies roared to life. Battleships including the USS Texas, USS Nevada, and HMS Ramillies unleashed a devastating bombardment on German positions, smashing concrete pillboxes and scattering defenders. Then, at exactly 8 o'clock a.m., the main assault began. Waves of landing craft ferried the U.S. 3rd, 45th, and 36th Infantry Divisions toward the sandy beaches near Saint-Tropez, Saint-Raphael, and Cavalier-sur-Mer. Unlike the harrowing carnage witnessed at Omaha Beach just weeks earlier, resistance on these beaches was relatively light. Caught off guard, the few German defenders were quickly overwhelmed. By nightfall, more than 94,000 Allied soldiers had landed, sustaining fewer than 400 casualties. With the beaches secured, Allied forces pressed rapidly inland. Within a single day, American troops had advanced as far as 20 miles in some areas, far exceeding the pace of the earlier Normandy campaign. Town after town was liberated, their residents cheering for the returning French and their American allies. The crucial port cities of Toulon and Marseille, expected to resist for weeks, perhaps months, were both reached within days of the landings. What followed was one of the fastest advances of the entire European campaign. As German lines collapsed, French armored columns pushed north alongside American infantry, joined by the hard-fighting French resistance who rose in open revolt. The German High Command, faced with simultaneous pressure from the north and now from the south, gave the fateful order to retreat, a decision that would cost them dearly. At Montélimar, Allied forces set a trap, battling to cut off the fleeing German columns. Though thousands of enemy troops slipped through, Army Group G left behind most of their equipment and suffered immense casualties. The momentum of the Allies could not be slowed. By August 28th, merely 13 days after the operation's start, the vital ports of Toulon and Marseille were in Allied hands. Despite fierce German attempts to sabotage the facilities, skilled American engineers soon had the docks operational. By mid-September, more supplies were pouring through Marseille than through the entire Normandy supply chain. The lifeline that would sustain the final Allied push into Germany was finally secure. As Dragoon forces swept northward up the Rhône Valley and joined hands with General Patton's Third Army near Dijon, France was cleaved in two. The trap closed around thousands of German troops. In just 4 weeks, Operation Dragoon liberated 10,000 square miles of French territory and inflicted losses on the German army rivaling those in Normandy. Allied armies advanced 400 miles in less than a month, a rate of progress that astounded friend and foe alike. Yet for all its significance, Operation Dragoon soon faded from public recollection. Newspapers and newsreels remained focused on earlier battles and northern advances. The cemeteries, like the one at Draguignan where 860 Americans rest, receive few visitors. The campaign's swift success, combined with relatively light casualties and little drama compared to Normandy, consigned it to the footnotes of history. In retrospect, Military historians recognize that the operation was indispensable. Without the southern ports and the second hammer blow from the Mediterranean, the titanic struggle in northern France might have stalled. The rapid sweep up the Rhone trapped Germans who might have regrouped deeper inside Germany if given time and space. Just as important, Operation Dragoon allowed French troops to take a central role in liberating their homeland, restoring hope and national pride after years of occupation. As we look back, we know now that the story of D-Day must be told in two parts: the courage at Normandy and the silent thunder of Operation Dragoon that raced up from the Mediterranean. Both prongs of the Allied advance, coming together to close the jaws on Hitler's armies, forged the victory that defeated Nazi Germany.